wrote, and it is literally uh, lessons from his 30 odd years in sales. And you would think that uh, it's difficult to crystallize what you have learned, but when you look at the book, you'll really enjoy it. Let me introduce Glenn Poulos. Glenn is the co-founder, vice president, and general manager of Gap Wireless Inc., a leading distributor for the mobile broadband wireless and test measurement equipment market. So it's pretty complex, right? With over 3 decades of experience in sales, he has spent thousands of hours in the field, on the phone, with customers, and working with salespeople to help create several very successful companies. After entering the sales field in 1985 as a technical sales rep, Glenn founded his first company, Wave Technologies Inc., in 1991, and simultaneously served as president of Anritsu Electronics Limited for 9 years. Using his extensive knowledge and experience in the industry, he lectures groups on sales strategy, consumerism, and what motivates people at a raw emotional level. Glenn lives near Toronto, Ontario, so we are sort of neighbors in Canada, where he enjoys hiking, skiing, and playing pickleball. Glenn, I have to figure out what that one is, but that's for another day. Welcome to your session.
Thanks, Sanjan. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm very happy to be here. So, and welcome to everybody joining the event today. Should be a great event. So, looking forward to it. So, and it's always nice to be one of the people that gets to start out the day while everyone's fresh. And so, yeah, happy for that as well. And I believe I have about 18 to 20 minutes here. As you'll come to see in the title of the book, I have 57 tips. I would either have to speak very quickly or maybe reduce it down to some of the most important. So that's what I decided to do. And so my goal of today was to have you guys walk away with the message, the theme of my book, which I like to say is how to get, act, and stay in front of customers, and how to be a pleasure to do business with always. That's the goal of my book. That's the goal of my company. That's how I grew my business. Ultimately, I sold the business. That's probably a story for a different day. But funny thing, I ran it for 15 years. Then I sold it, and now I'm an employee of a large private equity firm running the business. But during the pandemic, I wrote a book, and I'd like to share with you today some of the top tips from my book. Never sit in the lobby. 57 winning sales factors to grow a business and build your career selling. So, without further ado, I will head into tip number one. And I'm just going to stop presenting because, it's not about my PDF presentation. It's more about the book and the message. So tip number one comes back. I made it up back in the 80s, as you'll find out from the title, is never fax the facts or ship the shit. So hopefully they don't have to bleep out that bad word. I think that's the only one in my presentation. But I learned back in the 80s that when I needed to send something to a customer, I didn't want to fax it. I didn't want to email it. I didn't want to mail, Purelator it, FedEx it. And I definitely, if it was a product, I definitely did not want to ship it to the customer. So what I mean by never fax the facts or ship the shit is if you have an opportunity to give something to a customer, you want to hand deliver it. Obviously, if you're in New York and the customer's in California, that's problematic. But I'm talking to people that deal with their customers in their territory, and they're normally out visiting customers on a regular basis. Any opportunity to visit the customer is infinitely better than mailing something or emailing it to them. Although that may feel convenient and comfortable for you, it's not better for your business, and it's definitely not better for your relationship. So that is a rule that I follow to this day. And people often question me on it, and but to me, it's it's held to be true. And some of the other rules that I'm going to share with you, you'll realize that they can't happen unless you're in front of the customer. So tip number two from the book is a lot of times, sales guys will come to me and they'll say, hey, you want me to go visit the customer, but I don't really have anything to say to them. What do I do, and why do I go and see this customer, right? And so tip number two is when you go to a customer, always have something in your hand and something in your mind. And so, or something on your mind, right? And so you never want to show up empty-handed. So it might be, it might be the quotation they asked for. It might be product literature, marketing materials. It might be, as we love in Canada, donuts. And I have a rule: never deliver donuts after 10:30 because you'll just spoil his lunch. But nonetheless, donuts. It could be a giveaway. Maybe you're giving away water bottles, or little notebooks or pens, pencils, mouse pads, things like that. Always have something in your hand, and always have something very specific in your mind to talk to them about. And by arming yourself with these two things, you have both an icebreaker and a conversation starter. And of course, I go into great detail in the book. Not enough time today to do that. But this is how whenever a sales guy says to me, hey, what do I do? I said, hey, just show up with something in your hand and something in your mind. So that's tip number 2. So tip number 3, of course, is my favorite tip because it is the title of the book. And tip number 3 is never sit in the lobby. And so a young fellow that bought the book, he said to me before he read it, he said, so if I don't sit in the lobby, do I sit in my car? And I'm like, no, you don't sit at all. You're supposed to stand in the lobby, right? So when you show up to a customer, you announce yourself. Nowadays, there may not be a receptionist. It might be a phone. You phone up to the customer to ask them to come down and see you. But once you've done that and you're waiting for the customer, do not sit down. Do not pull out your phone. Do not be like walking around the building looking for, at their awards and things on the wall. Just be waiting at attention at the door they're likely to walk through, so that when they walk through, you're ready to shake their hand and say, nice to meet you, something in my hand, something in my mind. And the worst thing is when you're a salesperson and you're distracted, you're on your phone, you're sitting on their nice leather chair, and you don't even realize the person walks in. And they're like, excuse me, Glenn, are you Glenn? And I'm like, and I'm chatting with my wife about what's for dinner, right? And it's not a good look. And you then have to rise up from a chair to greet the customer. And again, they're towering over you. It's, again, for me, it's all about how do I look, and how do I act when I'm in front of the customer. And so I find this to be a very powerful tool, and it keeps me on point. Of course, I don't want to show up too early because I don't want to be standing in the lobby for 10 minutes. So I show up on time, I call them from the lobby, and I wait for them, and I greet them, right? So that is tip number 3. And tip number 4 is, this one's a little strange. People, kind of, raise an eyebrow. But tip number 4 is when you're in the lobby and you're talking to the person, I always ask them for a mini tour. And people are like, a mini tour? What in the world is a mini tour? And I'm like, well, a mini tour is a tour that's mini. And so people are like, okay, what's that? And I'm like, well, if you've ever been on a tour, they're very long. And by the time, you're halfway through it, you're sleeping. A mini tour is basically, hey, I'm here to show you something new. I want to get into your building. I want to see your new warehouse, your new production area, your new engineering lab, your new parking system, your new lobby, your new whatever area of the building your products or services cater to. You want to ask them for a quick look around their building. Could I get a quick tour of the lab? Could I get a quick tour of the warehouse? And you'll be surprised, most often they will agree. And this allows you with many advantages, which will come out here shortly. And if people are like a little bit reluctant, first of all, you've only asked for a mini tour, which would indicate that it's small and short. But then you say, look, only take a few minutes, and I promise I won't sell anyone any life insurance or encyclopedias while I'm in the building. And that usually gets a chuckle, and they will, give you the little tour that you need. And so following that there's a rule that I have, rule number 5, which I call never forget a face. And so never forget a face is the rule, but how do I deal with it? When I arrive to the customer and I'm waiting for a few minutes before my appointment to go in, and so I don't have to sit in the lobby, I want to stand in the lobby, I wait in my car. And while I'm in my car, I pull out my phone and I call up that customer because I've probably been there before. I have a not I'm the manager now, but I had a territory. I had a group of customers, and I would visit them on a regular basis, right? So I would go to that customer in my phone, and I would look at all the names, right? And I might have anywhere from one or two names up to like 20 names of people that I knew in that customer that I've met before. And what I do is I re-remember their face. And so, there might be, say, six people, and I look and I say, okay, Bob, right? Who's Bob? Oh, right. Bob's the bald guy, right? And then, Sam, okay, Sam, right? He's the short guy, really short guy, right? Sally, oh, that's the lady. She has red hair, and Jack and what have you. And I re-remember each one of their faces in the car. And if I can't remember their face, I go to LinkedIn, I find their profile, hopefully their photos there, and then I re-remember their face from LinkedIn. And so now, armed with that information, I show up in the lobby. I don't stand, of course, never sit in the lobby. You greet the customer, something in my hand, something in my mind, ask them for a mini tour, and they agree. And now all of a sudden, we're through the golden gates and into their building, walking through the building. Guess who walks by? Bob walks by. Hey, Bob, how's it going? Haven't seen you in a while. Jack, Sam, Sally, the whole, and all these people come through. And one of or a few of my customers, I would know like more than 24 people, and I would always have re-remembered their face. So obviously remembering it would be instantaneous, and I'd be walking through the building with these people, and I'd just be throwing out names left, right, and center. And people are like, "Oh my God, like this guy knows everybody," and the everybody that I would meet along the way would realize that I'd remembered their name, and that garners a huge amount of rapport with people. And I can't say enough when you compare it to the contrary, right? So imagine you're walking through, and Jack, Bob, Sam, and Sally all walk by you, and you've forgotten all their faces and names, and all of them remember your name, and they're all like, "Hi, Glenn," and you're like, "Oh, hi," and you're just stuttering, trying to remember who they are. And before you can remember it and pull it from your memory to the forefront, the moment is gone. You've offended the person, you've hurt their feelings, and they've walked by, and you've lost a perfect moment in order to establish excellent rapport with the customer. The only way to avoid that is to take bona fide steps beforehand to make sure it doesn't happen. And that's using the rule of never forget a face, right? So, switching gears a little bit, I have a rule. It's tip number 6 for today, and I call it freedom begins with no. And so, what I mean by that is, oftentimes when I'm, delivering a product, I might be delivering a product to a customer. Of course, I show up in the lobby. I've got the product with me. I ask them for a tour so I can set the instrument and set it up for them, show them the product a little bit, leave it with them. So I'll get there, we'll set it up, I'll look around, I'll notice that the competitors' units are there. I can see, brand A, brand B. So I realize I've got stiff competition. I'm getting, incredible, market data from this, exercise with the customer. And I get a chance to show them the product. And then the guy says, I need you to leave it with me for 2 weeks, right? I mean, this might be an $80,000 instrument, and very valuable, and it's on a tight schedule. Whatever amount of time, the customer asks for, I always say to them, I'm sorry, no, I can't leave it for 2 weeks, but I can leave it for 4 days or 5 days, something like that. I cut it in down by 50 to 60% of the time they ask for. The reality is, when you've been doing this a while, you'll realize that they very rarely spend any time with your instrument. They really look at it once or twice during the period. So by leaving it 2 weeks, you're taking it out of the market for an extended period of time, and the customer's actually not evaluating it. They're not running their products through it, doing testing or any of those kinds of things. They test it once or twice for a period, a few minutes, an hour, to evaluate it compared to what they have now. And then they put it back in its box and they leave it there. So there's really no point in having it sit there collecting dust for 2 weeks before you can send it to your next customer. And of course, remember, we never fax the fax and we never ship the shit. So we pick it up, we drop it off, we take it to the next customer. But the fundamental idea around the rule of freedom begins with no is the word no, and that it was like the customer asked for 2 weeks, you said no. By saying no, another example I like to give with this the story is you've gone through the whole process, you've provided quotes, there's been a bit of a negotiation back and forth with the procurement team or what have you, and they're decided on buying your product, and you're sort of at a last minute meeting, and the buyer says to you, Glenn, everything's great, but we're going to need another 3% from you. We're going to need you to go to the well and see what you can do and get us another 3%. So imagine now I'm the sales guy and I say, oh, okay, well, I don't have the authority to give the 3% for one. So I can't actually say yes. I can say two things, right? One is no, or two is I'll check. And the thing is that the moment I say anything other than no, all the work is now imparted upon me. So I now have to pack up my stuff, get in my car, drive back to the office, all the while figuring out what I'm going to tell my boss on why I didn't close the deal because this guy wants another 3% out of us. We've already given, but the real way to handle it would be to say, thank you for your question or whatever, but I'm sorry, we've been through a long negotiation period. We've come in with our best price. We're not going to be able to go any lower on price. And as a matter of fact, these are of course long lead time items. And you've indicated that you need, 4-week delivery, 6-week delivery, or what have you. If I actually don't get an order from you today and get this system in the queue by the end of the week, we're not going to make the next production run, and you'll be looking at an 8-week cycle or a 12-week cycle. So I'm sorry, but I won't be able to provide any more discount. And if you don't give me an order, you're not going to get your product on time. And sort of shift the focus back to them and make sure that they, they realize now the onus is back on them. But the real, the lesson to be learned is that when you say no to something, you sort of move the effort back to the person that's asking and you relieve yourself, and it's like, it's like in college, right? Your buddy says, hey, can you help me move, right? And of course, I'm not saying that you should say no to the guy because you might need his help. But when you say no, you go back to what you were doing and nothing happens. When you say yes, you got to get up early, you got to go to the guy's house, you got to lift, couches and chairs and tables up and down flights of stairs for the entire day. And you can see the difference, right? So when you've already given them your best price, when you've already given them the best deal, there comes a point where you need to be the one to say no. And it's only the person that's not developed in their role that they say, oh, let me go back and check with my boss, or I'll see what I can do. Ultimately, the number comes back as no anyways. The problem is that you look weak to your customer, you look weak to your management, and they question what they're paying you for because you're not delivering the message that needs to get delivered. So that's rule number 6. It's an important part, and I like to stress it. And tip number 7, it's another one I love. I learned it when I was a kid, and I call it, thank God it's broken. And so I don't know how old everyone is on this call, but when I grew up in the days when Sears was a very big store, big popular brand, and I bought everything at Sears and I worked at Sears as a teenager. There's a story about it in my book. But when something broke at Sears, they would fix it no matter what. And if you were unsatisfied with the product for up to a year, they would replace it, or they would give you your money back, no questions asked. And so what I find when things get breaking is the person of the mature salesperson will race to the phone when the customer calls saying, hey, it's broken, it doesn't work. It's the sort of weaker salesperson that says, oh, can you get the service department to call them back? I don't want to they're mad or whatever. But the point is that the real relationship with your customer isn't when you get the sale. It's when you perform the service after the sale. And so every time there's an opportunity to service the customer, that's where they justify the money they spent with you, right? If you've ever bought a nice car, it's really, the sale is one moment in time. It may be pleasant or maybe even a bit displeasant, but the real benefit of buying the car is the service that dealership provides. And when your salesman's available for questions, comments, and concerns, that's when they realize, hey, the next time, hey, I don't mind if you're 3% more, because when my product breaks, I know you're always there for me, Glenn. And so it really makes a difference, right? Tip number 8, we're getting to the end here. When you call a customer, don't just dial them and hang up, dial, hang up, dial, hang up. Always leave a voicemail. The rule is, when calling a customer, always leave a voicemail. Never less than 20 seconds, never more than 30 seconds. There's a long story and reason why about all that in the book, so I offer you a chance to read it. But that's sort of the magic window for how long. But it starts to look a little creepy when you keep calling a customer and your name comes up and you never leave a voicemail. If you leave a couple voicemail, they don't phone you back, send them an email. Eventually figure out, perhaps make an appointment to see someone else in the building and see if they'll drop you by their desk so you can say hello. Figure out other ways to get a hold of the customer, right? And tip number 9, which I'll want to leave you with, is kind of the moral of the story of my book, which is you only get forever to make another impression. And so a lot of people say, hey, wait a minute, my mom told me you got to make a good first impression. And I'm saying that's correct. But I said, I want you to treat every impression like it's a first impression. So when your boss walks by your desk, you want to make sure that you look like the busiest guy in the building. And, you don't want to be playing on Facebook and you're looking at your phone. You always want to be making a good impression, because the reality is, in business and in life, whether you like it or not, you're making an impression. So it might as well be a good one. So, that is sort of the sum total of the tips I wanted to share with you today. I'll just go to the end, and there's some links here that I'll just post quickly. And there you go, my website and my link tree, although I'm not sure if you can click it there. But on my LinkedIn, you can link to me in many various ways. And I'm happy to speak to anyone. I'm very, very active on LinkedIn and lots of good stories to share. So if you want to collaborate on anything, please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. This was great, and I think it was a great start to our day. I think practical experiences are so vital, and a lot of times we do not know whether these things actually work. But when we meet someone like you who is actually doing it and talking about it, it makes all the difference. I will gather questions, and I can tell you that Glenn is actually very responsive uh, to strangers. I was a stranger once, and I can tell you, I can vouch for that. And when he says that he will respond, he really means it. He's a very busy guy. I know that because I sort of know his travel schedule by now. But having said that,
Thank you.
He is still extremely responsive. And yes, please do reach out. If there is any questions you have, reach out to us. We are still running a little behind time, so I would like to get into the next session. Thank you, guys, and thanks, Glenn. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.